6:30, so I think I'm going to start the meeting. Will you please join us in beginning our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance? Flag is behind you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will begin our meeting with public comment. Anyone? We know we're going to hear from you. We know we're going to hear from all of you at some point this evening. I guess, well, I'll thank both of you for being here when we get to your part in the meeting, I guess. Would someone from the board care to review our norms?
I will do that. As a board, we will focus on student outcomes, be open-minded, respect each other, value different viewpoints, be responsive and responsible to our community, make decisions based on data and facts, listen to each other, be reflective, and run meetings that respect time, have concise agendas, are transparent, and follow Robert's rules.
Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
Okay. Do I have a recommendation to approve the minutes from our organizational meeting on March 7th?
So moved.
So moved by Michael.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Sue. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Okay, Martha, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. I think we've heard a little bit about what your movie, your film, and we're excited. We're excited. So, and I think our intent was that maybe our next step from here would be to show it to our community, right? So, but we wanted to see it first and yeah, I guess a preview and discuss it. So I guess I'll turn things over to you.
Well, great. Thank you very much for having me, and we're going to go into the gym to see that. And Sue may have filled you in on some of it because she's on our task force. So this is really our introductory piece to our virtual toolkit that will help schools to move racial equity work forward. And it's a great, what we found, what I'm hearing around the state when folks watch this film, it gets people thinking about where they are on a spectrum of equity work, and energizes people, and people want to show it to other people, and that's the whole purpose of it. And then the toolkit has a bunch of resources that schools and communities can use, and individuals as they move forward with equity work. So it's very exciting.
Okay.
What do you mean by equity work? I don't know that expression.
We're focusing on racial equity in this.
I see. Okay. Understood. Mm-hmm. Great.
But it really ties in nicely with the Agency of Education is working on equity. It's more of academic and opportunity equity, and I think dealing much more with socioeconomic issues. We are focused on racial equity.
Okay. Thank you.
So it seems that in a sense this would dovetail very nicely with Act 173. Just to some degree. Isn't that about more like equity of services and deliverance of services
That would be for-
those that are somewhat disadvantaged regardless of how?
Sure. I mean, I think that's one of the things that come under equity as we're
Right.
talking about that, yeah.
I think that it's really good timing, although everybody, when you start to work on this, it's why weren't we doing this years ago? But nevertheless, start somewhere. So all the different types of equity are being discussed and worked on. So we're trying to come up with as much information and as many resources as we can for schools to focus on when they focus on the racial equity piece, regardless of how many students of color they have in their school, even if there are none.
Like
This
Vermont.
needs to be addressed. Like Vermont.
Which is very homogeneous, right?
Yes, there are pockets, which you'll see.
You'll see in the movie.
Of more
there.
diverse racial.
And that's the issue, as you'll hear in the movie. And that's the other thing, is it's open to the public. It's easy to get the film. So when you want to watch it a second time, or third or 15th time, you can get it and listen to certain portions of it. And we also have a discussion guide that goes along with the film, and it's divided up into the sections of the film. It's a 30-minute film, but there are different sections of it, so that you can show it at an in-service or a staff meeting, and then have a beginning conversation, and then maybe go back to it on another staff meeting on another day. So,
Brooke and I just spent today at an equity training all day. And we were looking, it was more focused on poverty and equity. But we did talk on all aspects of equity, so it was pretty excellent. Got a lot of good ideas from that.
The refreshing thing about this work is that once people start to pay attention to it, they find that they're looking with a fresh set of eyes.
Yes.
On, like, in the library, on the walls in a
Right.
school, within themselves. And
And the language we use with students.
the language and the way in which you react to student behavior.
Right.
So it's exciting.
It is exciting.
Thank you so much for coming down,
Yes,
Martha.
thank you.
We're one of your first school boards you've done it with, or how many have
School
you done?
board, you are
Yes.
the first.
The
School
first.
board.
How
Nice.
exciting.
So I've been to various schools, different groups of people, different organizations. I was just in Middlebury at an in-service for support staff this afternoon, so we tied in really well. I just came a little farther down the road and went the back way, so I could go and look at all the scenery.
Is it designed specifically for professionals, or could you show it to a general audience as well? Would you show it to children or
I-
high school students,
High school
perhaps?
students for sure, probably middle school students. I don't know about younger
Younger
kids.
kids.
You can make that judgment yourself. For sure, the focus was for staff, school staff, but it totally is usable in a community setting, because you need to, this work needs to be done in a community way. It needs to be, the community needs to be reached too. And I think that this movie would work well for them. But we gave the directive to the filmmaker that this was to be an instructional film for staff. So not just teachers, but anybody who works with kids.
So for us to get it in the future to use with staff, we would just contact you and.
Nope.
No, I have the website, so I'll just share the
Oh.
link with you right now, and you'll have
There
it,
we go,
yeah.
we're all set.
And I can give you
Instant world, instant.
just a little background about our equity work, if you'd like to. I have like 20 copies of this, so I can review some. So that, this is just how we got started, so I don't need to ramble on about it, but you can just have
Thank
this
you.
for your own.
Thank you.
We can share it with our principals.
You must have been reading my mind, because I was going to ask you.
How this all came to be.
Yes, I was.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Came to be in 2015. And it has the website at the bottom of it also. And it's also mentioned in the film, they talk about H3, the Equity Standards Bill. One of the people in the film talks about that, and that was, since the film was made, it's been voted in by the House and Senate.
Yes, and signed by the governor.
signed it.
Yep.
So that's good news.
Ready to transition?
Sure. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Thinking about what else we have to do this evening. So I guess I'll turn things over to you then, Jackie.
Hey, let me just write that note so I don't forget about that retreat agenda. The first, recognition of Support Staff Association, I'm going to ask that you change the language on that a little bit. I've been awaiting a document from our legal counsel that you could sign, that the chair would sign off on, and we don't have that yet. And she apologized, she said, I'll have it in your hands. And instead, I'm going to ask that you authorize the chair to sign that paperwork on your behalf, but let me tell you what the heck she's going to sign. So we did, you received a request to recognize the support staff at this school as part of the association, that is currently serves the Taconic and Green support staff. So they want to be recognized as part of that bargaining unit. They've done everything they needed to do. There were a few, we went back and forth a couple of times, getting some clarity on, I wanted to make sure they had taken a vote, and that is, in fact, was the majority of the folks that had voted in favor of that. That had happened. We did a little clarity discussion on recognition, who can be recognized as part of that association. And if you supervise staff, or you have access to confidential information, you cannot be recognized. And so we had to clear that up a little bit, explaining what that meant to folks. So I'm comfortable that our understandings are in place, and I've gone back and forth with and I think I included you. You were included
Yes.
on that, and we've gone back and forth with that. So it's not really a choice that you have to say, no, we don't want to recognize them. They have the right to do that. To form a labor union and to be part of an existing, if they, and the Taconic and Green folks have said, yes, you can come and join us. So what Jane would just be signing is saying, yes, we recognize that, and the date we're suggesting, because it just makes sense with the flow of everything, that becomes effective on July 1 of this year. So I guess the paperwork, again, I've never done this before either, but the paperwork entails you signing off, and we also send a copy to the Labor Board to say that we've recognized, these folks have been recognized under this agreement. So the agreement is, that may be something you want to check out. You can find that on our website, and I can get you all, I can get you all, maybe I'll just include it at some point as a distribution so you see that contract. And we have 2 more years on that contract. We just renegotiated that contract this past year, so, and they're just finishing their first year. So they will walk into that contract with it existing as it is, and there'll be no changes to that right now. As far as from a budgetary perspective, you already positioned yourself to handle anything that would result from, and anticipate, you were trying to be really fair to them anyways. You didn't want it to be different to their counterparts. So, so that's what, so what we'd need tonight is just a motion to authorize the board chair to sign off on the documentation that's accepting the recognition.
So I'll make a motion that we give Jane the authority to sign off on item A.
Motion made by Diane,
I'll second.
seconded by Julie. Any discussion?
So this is a formal kind of labor union?
Yep. So your teachers.
Just forming now?
It's just forming now. It was the only labor union that existed for support staff was, in the SU, was with the Floodbrook. Floodbrook was the first, and they had been in existence for, boy, I want to say 15 or 20 years. They a long time they were in existence. And then it was probably 6 years ago that the Manchester school district support staff unionized, and then when the merger happened, the other schools came on board with that.
We had seen something from our support staff. It just didn't have any clarity, right? As
Right.
I recall, it was a couple meetings ago at this point.
Right, it was just that we have met and we want to do this, and
Right.
there were a few things that needed to be cleared up. There were some misunderstandings there, so I went back and forth with them on that, and we reached agreement, and I have a letter from them saying, yes, we understand who is recognized, we understand, we are in agreement on all of those issues. So I just wanted to make sure they knew that they were, by want to be part of this association, they were accepting all conditions of that contract, that we weren't into any separate negotiation
Right.
at this point, that they were, the recognition was the same, all of the conditions of that contract were the same. And so we just needed clarity on that, and we've got that, so we're good. Okay?
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved, 6-0. Okay. Moving on to board meeting dates.
Yeah, so you have new dates. When you approved the dates at the organizational meeting in March, Sue was not here, and so we went ahead and scheduled all kinds of meetings that Sue could not make.
Thank you for
And-
reconsidering.
So here is a list, a revised list of meetings, and hopefully this set of meetings works for you. And we also had that one mistake we had made on the Thanksgiving one, but we kind of changed, as you'll see, I think most of these were Mondays. We went on Mondays for most of them. Yeah.
I'll
Okay.
make a motion that we accept them.
Motion made by Diane,
Second.
seconded by Michael. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Is the board retreat still on June 8th? Do I have that right?
Yep.
Yes, I think it is.
All right, because I didn't see
Motion
that on
passes.
here. Okay.
0. Okay. Becky? Parking lot, right?
Okay, the next is I'd like you to authorize me to accept any parking lot paving and improvement bids that come our way. We have gone out once we put an RFP out and took a bid, but we're not satisfied with that bid, so we're going to go out again. And I'm just afraid, and we hope that time is of the essence here. And so we want to put that out again and then be able to accept that if it looks that it will meet our needs. And you have
Yes.
probably a lot more detail on that. You were part of that.
It was just the way we received the information, was very hard to compare between all the contractors.
In your
So they're
report.
meeting tomorrow night, tomorrow during the day, and having a walkthrough, so they all get the same information. And we asked very specifically to itemize some of the requirements, so that'll be much easier for us as we move forward. But it's a two-week turnaround, and we're hoping to really make a decision and move on quickly.
Yeah,
so.
and so it would all be operating within the budget that you already, we've had the discussion about that money to rework that, to do the paving and to rework the parking lot, so it would be within the budget, and,
Do we have a range? I know it was hard for you to compare, but was there,
The information that we received, we changed it since receiving more information. So the original bids had more concrete pavements and concrete sidewalks, and we're now going to more pavement sidewalks. And that's going to change considerably. So it's a lot more paving than originally we thought. But we can't even compare. I mean, they're like $50,000, $60,000 differences in our bids. So we can't even compare right now what that will be.
And that's because they didn't get,
They got the information, then Greg met with several contractors, and a lot of people didn't come through with pulling out their bids, so we were expecting like 6, we received 3. But I feel like the biggest discussion was how much we were gonna put on top of the back parking lot. Some of them were 0 adding, some were 12, and some were 18 amount of material, and that is huge, and a significant amount of money. So we actually had someone dig, we figured out what the bottom was and what we need to add, and with that in mind, it should be a lot cheaper than what we anticipated. So the bids have to be all redone based on that
it's a
information.
learning process. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
The
I
bid
will make.
proposal,
Oh,
excuse me, I'm sorry. The bid proposal has to be redone.
We did already do that, and we
Oh,
already
okay.
put it back out there. So we met last week, and yeah, so there's a very detailed proposal that's put out there for contractors now that includes certain information.
do you have a high and a low number that you can read that in front of you?
No, because I think even the one paving company that gave us information, it was Greg was saying it was like a $40,000 difference just based on how he bid it. So at this point, we're anticipating them to be a lot lower. But no, I don't have any numbers to give you right now this time.
But you have old bids.
Yeah, but they weren't bid the correct
No,
way.
I understand that.
So-
I'm not asking for you to give me numbers that you're gonna get. I'm asking if you can give me numbers that you've already gotten.
I actually don't have any of that information. So he gave me, it was all like sealed bids. He brought them here one day, showed me 3, and took them away from him. I don't even know. So,
I will make the motion to authorize the superintendent to accept parking lot paving and improvement bid.
Motion made by Sue,
I'll second it.
second by Diane. Discussion? No discussion, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Okay.
You asked that I put on the agenda an opportunity for you to discuss and maybe take action on committing to Phase 2 of policy governance work with Val Gardner. Phase 2 would involve, and I'll just mirror what the traditional approach is in Phase 2, is that Val usually does, I think 1 or 2 times she would come to meetings again, and she's like an hour session, and she'll have a focus she'll work with the board on. And then when we get into budget season, she kind of backs off, but we still do a rehearsal for 3 or 4 months. We bring in a scenario, and it gets you familiar with working with the model policies. So you would have your model policy packet, and you look at your decision-making and your response based if you were operating from a policy governance, through a policy governance lens. So that's goes on for 4 months or so. And then in the spring, she would come back again and starts to go through a series of 4 more times. When you talk about, you'll do community engagement, you'll do board self-assessment, you'll do board governance, and ends policies. And she'll talk to you about, you'll go through a session that's about an hour, 60 minutes on each one of those. And the end of that period, and so that's where Taconic and Green is right now. They're going to need to make a decision if they want to fully embrace and transition to using those model policies. And you still you use the model policies as the place from where you govern, but you also, because there are mandatory policies in Vermont, you also have your mandatory policies that are your Vermont. And then every year, we'll review those, but just using a consent agenda to say we've done, you don't dig too deeply into that. What you're working with is your ends policy documents. So that's what Phase 2 means. And so it is about a year of going through that work and figuring that out. I did ask her, I said, if the board had interest in front-loading that, could they do that if they wanted to do that? And she said, yes, you could if you were so inclined. She said what would happen is you'd do a 4-hour session with her, and she would go through some, those significant components, and you go from there. So, I think it's where the board, this one's up to you, like where your comfort level is, what you feel you're ready for, what you want to do. Phase 2 it still is, it is still getting just comfortable with it and understanding it more deeply.
I think it's important that we gain more knowledge and do it in a moderate pace. So I'm not for just going ahead. I'm not convinced that it's the best policy. So I want to learn more. I want to take all those steps that she's describing and figure it out.
So I'm intrigued by some of the possibilities that it opens for us, but I have some concerns. I feel like we fell so far down that stupid rabbit hole of driver's ed that it was just frustrating for everybody. And so I was trying to think after that meeting, like how I could have put it differently. And so I'm going to put it this way to you, Jackie, because you have more experience having worked with T&G on this.
But I'm still a novice.
But
so.
you're still, I know, but I think we have all already, even without working with policy governance, committed to not running a school because we have no basis in fact of how to do that. It just isn't our wheelhouse. But I think I want to have some, like, I don't know if it's authority or control, or I just want to be able to, like, maybe not like pinpoint, but really narrow things down. So this was my, like, stupid little mind thing that I did. If we have in our ends policy, that we have decided as a district that we would like all of our kids to leave with the knowledge of the importance and the methodology of how to create more flowering plants in our environment. And we have decided unanimously as a board that what that means is that every kid who leaves this school has had an introductory to beekeeping course. Can we make that happen?
So, I think.
Because you could say, I don't think that that's what they mean.
I think if the ends policy, so remember the ends policy would be from the community. And if the ends policy said, we want all students to leave with an understanding of flowering plants, okay? So then the next step, you wouldn't say it's going to be a beekeeping course. You wouldn't prescribe as the board
Right,
what
not in
it's
our
going
ends
to be.
policy, but that's our understanding.
But so that would be the ends policy. And then what happens is that as superintendent, and I work, of course, with the principals, I do an interpretation for you, and I say, okay, I come back to you and say, this is your ends, so this is my interpretation as to this is how we're going to measure that. This is what we're going to do. Here are the means. So that is our job to define what those means will be. You as a board can say, you look at that and you say, okay, we think that'll work, that interpretation. You go for it. And you approve that, or not, or you can say it's not, no, that's not quite what we're looking for, what about this, and you have a discussion as a board. And then when the monitoring kicks in, so as I understand it, it's first that interpretation, so we do that, and then off of that, though, I'm going to say, if we're doing that beekeeping course, this is how I'm going to report out to you as to how we did on that. And so that interpretation is very aligned to that monitoring. And that's what I bring back to you once a year, and you say, yay, nay. No, did it, hit the mark, didn't, it isn't really, it may be that I did what you asked me to do, because we approved that, but it wasn't, you wanted deeper. And so then you would go back in and maybe rework your policy and get deeper on your policy to get at it. That's how I understand it. And so the driver's ed, I know that's so the driver's ed, does that, what I'm thinking about, does that come in somewhere under an equity?
That's what, that's where I was coming from with,
is
if
that,
we can say, like, I just felt like I got no, you cannot force that issue. And I don't want to come in, and I don't want to have even remotely the idea in my mind that I'm going to come in and force issues. But I know that we have a community who is like, if they want X, they don't want Y because it's close. They want X.
Yeah.
So how can we as a board, I want to be able to, as a board, be able to say, no, close, it's not horseshoes and hand grenades, it's not good enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, I think we have to kind of work with it to, I mean, again, I feel like I'm such a novice too, how do you work that through? And I was just, Val happened to be at the training we were at today, and she and I get into a conversation because one of the things Taconic and Green was talking about the last meeting is, do we need a separate policy on equity? Because they're now running into some issues, and we're going to continue, we're always going to be talking about equity. And I said, is that a policy though? Is it an ends? And she said, well, you probably never get an ends, probably with all of those communities, they would probably not care enough to say, here's an equity. She said, but in your executive limitations, you could absolutely have one of your policies speak to that the superintendent will not have any inequities that exist across the district. So that's how you kind of get at that, and then what does your what would my interpretation be of that, and how are we going to monitor that? So, yeah, I mean, and driver's ed too is a little more complicated, and I meant to go and look at the law again on that, and I forgot, because, I mean, there is something in the law that kids have, you know, access to driver's ed in Vermont. And so, I mean, we'd have to just look at the statute around that. I should have checked that, and I forgot, but I will check that. So it may, you know, I just don't remember it off the top of my head. But it is in statute and it says something
And I know
that we
that
will provide.
we addressed the equity issue where it was brought to the board a few years ago where people couldn't afford to have their child enrolled and then get reimbursed. So we spent some time, that was last year, the year before, where we now are allowing, when they register for the SU,
Right.
to pay ahead of time, which is a huge change in practice. And then they have to like show us they passed afterwards. But it's very
Yeah.
different because we knew people couldn't even enroll because they didn't have the money to be
Right.
able to do that.
Right.
So, not to get lost in the driver's ed weeds. And I like your beekeeper idea. Personally, I have a tiny little lens into this policy governance. I mean, I kind of waded through this, and a lot of it was very difficult to understand, and I felt like Val made things certainly clearer. I personally think I found it really intriguing, exciting. I didn't see it as diminishing the power of the board, but what I liked about it was that I sensed that there is a structure that would make for accountability, for more transparency, and it seemed like a very functional, cross-checking kind of a structure from the tiny bit that I understand or think I understand about it. And that, to me, gave me a particular kind of I don't know what, security in that I am, even though I've done school board work before, certainly reasonably, I don't have a lot of exposure, so it puts me in touch with people around me who are going to know more, and a structure that will help us to stay on track. So I thought it was certainly worth exploring as a board, and that was my take on it. I found it helpful. I tried to, explain it to my wife when I got home. It was like, watching a physics program. No, I couldn't, it was like, I couldn't reconstruct a lot of it, except that the idea of having this accountable structure that really has a hierarchy that didn't feel, at least in the description, tyrannical, or like we'd be absorbed and swallowed by some giant, administrative thing that serves itself. It seemed like genuinely empowering for the people in the board itself, possibly anyway.
I'm in favor of exploring it more, too. I like the community engagement for the board aspect of it. And I think that everybody on the board seemed enthusiastic about that, so.
And I think you could still, I don't think you need to wait like a year to still do the policy governance. I mean, you could do some of the community engagement next year with your community and just that will inform you around, what might we do when we put that, fine tune the ends policies, and, it will inform you. You might as well go through that process, because I think your community would really benefit your community at this time to do that.
I think regardless of what way we go with policy governance, to do that community forum is really important for
Yep.
us, and it goes back to our goal, our one goal, of really
Yep.
being one educational community and really having a handle and an understanding of what our community is looking for and how we can best serve them.
And Val sent me all of those questions, so that might be a great thing at the retreat too, to kind of look at that and make a plan for like, how might you tackle all of that? And, what do we do?
I, in all likelihood, will not be, well, I might go to your retreat, but I'm not gonna be on the board. So I would like to ask now, if we can, that maybe some commitment to attending a couple of things in our community in light of, that community engagement thing be on the agenda at the retreat, so that we can come up with, I'm looking at our schedule, so that we could come up with us, one or two things in Pollitt and Rupert that could happen, over the summer, between the summer and fall, so that it's not kicked down the road too much further. And one thing that I can tell you, that I would just, one suggestion, is that the town hall in Pollitt has various activities, that should be on the town website. And they also have a Mettawee Maker, which meets, I don't remember what Saturday it is, but it's every month, it's once a month. So that could be a spot where we, even just if, you go in and put up a whiteboard and kick around for a little bit and then come back and take down a whiteboard with whatever suggestions have been made, as an idea to leave you with.
It's a good idea.
It is a good idea. It is a good idea. Okay.
I think you'd want if you,
So I'll make
it
a
would be
motion
good to
that
know
we
if you
commit
wanted
to
to go to
checking
phase
out
two.
phase two.
Well, I was just gonna say, is there any more discussion?
Oh, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, so we need a motion, right?
I think Diane made that.
Diane made the motion, seconded.
Second.
Michael? Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Okay, follow up on S63. Jackie, you want to go with that, or you want?
No, I mean, I think
Okay.
you are the experts on
Well,
that.
I don't think I'm an expert on anything here right now.
We're not getting very far on any of
well,
this, but.
Yeah, you know what, the first thing I'll do is when we met, I have a copy for each board member, and one for you, Jackie.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think there's one for each of you there, and one extra one. Somebody's gonna find my original,
Oh,
probably. There you go. There
Oh,
you
this
go.
is not
That's
it.
There's
That's something
four,
else.
yes. I'm sorry. Anyway, so, as we discussed at the meeting a month ago, I guess it was a month ago, that letter went out on Friday. I've given you each a copy. It was sent to Senator Sears, Campion, McNeil, Collmore, and Hooker. A copy was sent to Dan French, and a copy was sent to Krista Hewling, who is and I guess that's all
Chair
on
of
the
the
back.
state
The
board.
chair of the state board. Also, Robin Chestnut Chanderman. Everyone that got a copy is on the back. Every one of the individuals who got a copy got an individual email from me, why they were receiving it. To be quite honest, I have only heard back from 4 individuals. One of whom, just like the response was, "It's nice to hear from you." So we didn't get much response. Sue did send a letter to Krista Hewling,
I did a follow-up email.
a
to
follow-up
your
letter, email,
Yeah.
this past week, and that has prompted some response. Do you want to share that?
Yes, well, she said that she would forward it to, this letter to all the state board members, because we were asking for their support of S63.
That's my letter
so-
had asked for that. right.
Yes, right. So,
Or my email to her had asked for that.
Right.
Her support.
yeah.
Um,
And I watched their state board meeting, the video of their state board meeting that would have been after she had received this, and they didn't discuss it at all, so that's why I sent a follow-up email.
Right.
They
Saying
were
you didn't discuss
discussing-
it.
They were discussing S63, though? Or
No,
nothing?
nothing about it.
Nothing. I did follow up, actually, and the following week, then I sent copies to all of our petition signatures. So they have received those as well. So while this has all transpired, Melanie has kind of gathered some data for us. And
that I hope would be helpful, and I hope you consider this as a draft or a way to begin, and can I go ahead and start?
please do.
And do you mind if I bring up a chair just so I can read the text?
Not at all.
like I said, this is a draft. I feel comfortable saying right now that this is not an expansion of dual enrollment at all for the state. And even if you go back and change the numbers a little bit, if something's off, it's still not going to be one. And the way I came to that conclusion, and I'll happily point out areas where I think it's weak, and I have a lot of links to things online, but I'd rather email you or maybe Jane this, and you can look at that later, because you could spend the afternoon reading about dual enrollment in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New York, and you probably don't want to do that tonight. So I said, who stands to benefit for S63, I think the House is H118. I said Vermont residents that are declined access to state dual enrollment program due to distance from Vermont
It's not
schools.
showing on the screen yet, Melanie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's not,
That's
even
okay.
you doing it, it's just, it has to read it.
Well, I can tell you, there are 200, from my first time through the numbers, 231 students in the state. They're mostly in 7, I think 8 SUs.
When you say 231 students, you are talking students who attend a school out of state?
Out of state, from grades 9
Through
through 12, and only public schools.
There you go.
Only public schools.
Right.
Because there are some SUs that send kids to independent schools.
Right.
And I got, well, these are the SUs, and the other people are concerned, they're just people in the community that don't want to see the inequity. Let's see. So I went about doing this, the AOE has a map of all the school districts, and so I called them all around the state of Vermont. There are not that many. And I asked for either an enrollment report, which out of the 8 SUs, I was able to get 5 enrollment reports, and then I got 3 letters from the administrative assistants to the superintendent, which I would like to go back and get a letter from their business manager, but I trust their numbers. I would just rather have a more, official looking document. And this is how it sort of lays out now. Up in the map, everything outlined in blue is a SU. If it's solid blue, it's a district. If it's that are accessing out-of-state ed. The rest, the red SUs are either non-tuitioning or they're tuitioning only to Vermont schools, so they don't fall into this category. Sandgate, the little Sandgate, you see it. I have documentation from them. They currently have no students using out-of-state schools, and there's some interstate school districts. So everything around the state was covered. So Grand Isle, Alburg has 26 students, and South Hero, the other part of that state, they tend to go a different direction into Vermont. So it's mostly that district. Moving to number 2 is NEK Choice, where I think there are also 26 students. Kingdom East has 2, and Caledonia Central has 2. I think they mostly use St. Johnsbury and independent schools, and very few kids go out of state, but a couple do. When I look at this, I'm seeing allies too, by the way, if you want to contact people. Windsor Southeast SU says 50. I'm asking for a confirmation from them again. I got an email that said 50 students using New Hampshire public schools, but I wanted them to say 9 through 12, and I haven't gotten that back yet, but I will double check it. During my conversations with them, I said 9 through 12, so I think that that's the number, but I want it in print. Let's see, where was I? Windsor, and then Wyndham, poor Wyndham, 65 kids, and there are 2 districts now, 2 were consolidated. And Bennington Rutland, we have 41. This is just 9 through 12. Couldn't count 7th and 8th. And Greater Rutland SU, Wellspring has 19, but I think my thing's cut off. So that's the total of 231. And so to understand whether it was truly an inequity, because these kids do have dual enrollment opportunities in other states, I had to look at those programs. There are links here. You can take it home and look at them. This is from 2016 that just states that only Vermont and Massachusetts have statewide policies about it. But we know that there is dual enrollment in those other states. Everybody's, I assume, familiar with Vermont's 19 institutions of higher education, very broad, free vouchers, emphasis on free. New Hampshire program, is not as broad and not completely free. You can get reduced tuition and financial aid, but still the bottom line, you pay 75 to 100 bucks per class. So it's not equitable in that sense. Massachusetts is not free at all to anybody but Massachusetts residents, and New York is like this bureaucracy. They're so huge. They have a couple of different ways of going about doing it, but there's no state policy, and it's very limited if it's free, and I cannot determine whether it was actually free. And that's the next slide. There are links here. You can read it, the Vermont policy, the community college policy system. You can link to it. And also in New Hampshire, they use the Southern New Hampshire University, which makes the curriculum more broad, but still not free. In Massachusetts, it's any public college or university, but it's only for Massachusetts residents. And from what I can tell about New York, and I'm sure Jane and you people know about it better than I, it's really determined by district, because Granville has 2 courses, there we go, that they teach, but again, not free, that you can take while you're in high school in Granville. And I don't think that Salem had that. I didn't look at Salem this year, but
Salem did for a while, but they don't right now.
okay. So, but still not free, so it's not equitable in my mind. And here, I wanted to try to figure out, if I knew there were 231 kids in the state being denied this, is there a way to project how many vouchers the state would actually have to issue? And it's a little confusing because I got unofficial numbers because they're the most recent, and I have official numbers. So I compared all the high schools in the state that had a population plus or minus 10% of 231, because that was our aggregate, considering them all to be typical high school students. And then through reports to the legislature, I found out how many vouchers they were issued since the inception of the program, and then I averaged it. And then I got an average of all. And I would take the black numbers more seriously, because I think that some of those could change the fiscal year 18, since they aren't official. But that's 17.75 vouchers the state would have to issue if they expanded dual enrollment. That comes to, and I think something slipped around here. It is, let's see, it is 0.66% increase. It's not even a whole percentage point increase.
Say that again.
0.66 for that number. Okay. If you look at the other number, it's a little higher, I think, but it's still a ridiculously low number. And then I wanted to try to determine the need for those vouchers, so I went back to my AOE map, and I erased the districts, and I put it on top of my gazetteer map. And then I found, my thing is sort of cut off. There's a list of 28 towns that I found, and I went to the American Community Survey, which supplies data to the U.S. Census, and found, let's see, might be on the next, 23 communities. That in these communities, only 20.6% of residents have college degrees. The state average is 37, I think I put here. 37, yeah. So it's well below, it's in my mind, an underserved community, all of them. And then I wanted to think about what it cost, and I got this from the AOE. One course is a 3-credit hour, I think is, what does they say, 804. And then 700 and some for less, and then it's cheaper if you have somebody come and teach at your high school. And then I wanted to see the impact on Mettawee. And this, if somebody crafts this and takes it to another level, I would take this out. I just got it for you guys. The AOE says that since the inception of the program, the number was so low, and I think that the reason that people didn't apply is they didn't know about it. Since the inception of the problem, 11 is the most that they could possibly, they couldn't give me an accurate number, because it would be an invasion of privacy. So if that's 11 students, that's, I think, 2.2 students a year that are being left out of Mettawee. Still, that's 5% of our students. They all deserve that. It isn't a big deal in my mind to provide that. So I started thinking about next steps to take this to a more professional level, get all the kinks worked out, It could be shared with legislators and influencers in the state, just somebody could give a brief to the Dan French, if they're so inclined. And then I would also consider just briefly looking at Brigham, if you could get legal counsel to see that. And I don't know, Brigham's kind of interesting. There's one part, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, but this kind of stuck in my craw a little bit. The distribution of a resource as precious as educational opportunity may not have as its determining force the mere fortuity of a child's residence. And I'm going the wrong way here. Let's see. So if somebody, wanted to find out if that is applicable when you're into dual enrollment programs, I don't know. That I'm not sure about. Also, if you've read the dual enrollment statute, there's an interesting part in it, and I don't understand why they just didn't change the language. Let's see. Because it's just where the word designated falls into that pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, is it not easier to ask for a change in language?
That's
than-
what we've asked.
That's
for.
what we did.
That's what
and
our
so, but
request has been.
why is it S63 instead of the change in language? Or is it accomplishing the same thing? Let's see.
Well, we asked for a change in language to S63 because that was the vehicle that's in the legislature
Yeah.
now, but, yeah.
And, here, I gotta go back.
Melanie, and the 231 kids, is that 231 kids that are attending schools out of state
Hampshire,
that,
New York?
right, but that are non-designated?
There are and here.
Okay, I'm just.
There are no designated schools in the state of Vermont except for Thetford Academy.
Okay,
and it's
so-
and it's an in-state independent school.
Okay.
So you could almost take out part of that dual enrollment statute, and it wouldn't affect anybody because nobody designates out-of-state schools, and the only schools that are designated is an independent school.
Okay.
So it kind of like, I don't know why that's even there. But, just thinking about, what to do, I really hope that the community pushes to change the legislation. And I know it's probably a hard thing to accomplish and will take some energy. But in the interim, I thought, who wants to tell their neighbor their kid's not going to get a dual enrollment voucher? And so I started thinking, are there resolutions? And Section G, of course, this would cost the district something. You can contract with other institutions to provide them. And I would think a little bit about this because when I was going down the eastern side of the state and talking to all these people in who use schools in New Hampshire, and some who didn't tuition out of state, but wanted the dual enrollment in New Hampshire and not Vermont because of how credits would transfer and proximity to the schools. And it occurred to me, if kids are choosing Salem and Granville because they get a really good deal at SUNY, I assume that's still the case, you can get in-state tuition, that maybe credits from SUNY would be more fitting for our community. It's a lot of research to figure that out. And, the cost may be prohibitive. But it seemed like something that, may serve the community better. I don't know. Or you can go through an independent school, and because Lily's at Burton, I asked the guidance counselor if that was possible, and he said yes, and he sent a letter to that effect, although again, it would cost more than what the vouchers are, the $800, it would be more than that. But the door isn't shut. It was just,
So that means they wouldn't equal that $800?
they would charge you more, because,
Charge more.
yes, because they can't just simply be a conduit to the state. They had several, they have to go through a guidance process, somebody would have to go there once, they have to prove that they're college ready. And to be fair to the other kids that are just taking one class, because there are a lot there that are homeschooled, or kids that are in middle school that are taking advanced math, there's a certain price for that one class. They feel like they could not, but I'm not on the school board, maybe one of you guys could talk to them and see what they'd say to you, that they give you, a better deal. So, and from what I understand, it would just be meeting at the beginning of the semester or the summer program, whenever, to establish the program, and then it would be, taking courses online. Or maybe, I guess you could go to Castleton. I mean, when you think about what's close by here So, but anyway, and I think that's, and also, you know, I thought about, you know, just because Granville is offering some courses, has anybody reached out to the school boards at Salem and Granville to talk to them about increasing opportunities?
Not yet, we're at the beginning of this process.
Well, it occurred to me, and I don't, you know, I don't mean to tell you what to do, but I just, you know, it seemed like a way to sort of resolve a problem. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
And you know, if I would like to perfect it a bit more, and then once I get the letters from the business managers, I give it to you, and maybe you could share with other
Sure.
people. And if you have questions or concerns, I also think that somebody like Chuck Armentrout, a professional person to give the brief goes a long way
Right.
to you know, making things happen.
You mean in front of the legislature?
Or just to the AOE, you know, or to the state school board, or to Ann French. Because, I mean, it's a really low number of students that would, increase the vouchers, and the cost is gonna be, I think, minuscule, you know, if it's 0.66%, so.
I still don't understand why the state's taking such a position on this, you know.
They said, I talked to Anna Simmons, and she said they've always, they've always refused to give kids, those vouchers, and if your school district was choice, and you were using an out-of-state school. And she seemed to think it would stand up to Brigham. But then again, she works for the Agency of Education.
It's such an equity issue, though, and it seems
Yeah.
like so much of what's happened in this state in the past few years has revolved around equity and continues to revolve around equity, that it seems like, well,
Yeah.
it seems like it's pretty straightforward, but apparently it's not.
What gets me is that all those communities are, really need them, because of the number of college graduates was much lower. And I did not look at the median family income. I could, but I would imagine that it's not up to the state average.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
for all your work on
Melanie,
that.
thank you so very much.
Oh, you're welcome. If I could do something else, let me know.
So,
Considered law school, huh?
I think at this point, we as a board need to make a decision, or at least discuss, and hopefully take some action tonight, I think, as to what our next steps should be. From my perspective, this is not something we should just let be. We need to move forward. If we're not getting the responses we want, if we're not even getting any responses at all, how do we up our end of the ante to get some people to raise some eyebrows and to take notice to the fact that this is an issue for us. This is an issue for our students.
Do you, I mean, you said that Kristen Hulig was gonna maybe follow up with this, but do you have any hopes with that, or?
Well, all she said was I have forwarded it to all the state board members.
They don't, but we had already.
And they have they meet monthly. I believe they have a meeting next week, and they usually post their agenda about a week ahead of time, so.
Would it make sense to have some, you know, this thing that Melanie's put together to forward that for that meeting, you know, to Kristen, or do you think it's too cumbersome?
What do you guys?
Well, I don't.
I think that we would it would be more effective if we could make sure that we got on the agenda and presented it.
And that's what you were saying, like
Yeah,
Chuck or something,
yeah.
maybe to.
And so I don't think that would necessarily be able to happen next week. But I'm hoping that they discuss it. Robin Chestnut Tanderman, there's a bill called the Miscellaneous Ed Bill, and it gets a lot of different things put into it. And he is working to get something put in there, but the only thing that he has been able to get any traction on at all is some type of a grandfathering provision. So it's really not solving the problem.
Band-Aid.
Yeah, it's a Band-Aid.
But Sue, isn't the State Board of Ed's position going to be, well, it's in statute, that, you know, that it has to be a designated school? I mean, how are they going to,
Well,
how are they going
the
to?
statute is really not that clear, Jackie. When the legislators talk about it, they all look at it and say, these kids already have it when I read this. And then the AOE comes in and says, that's not how we interpret it, and, you know.
Okay.
There's
So,
no comma there.
yes, there's no comma, there's no, yeah.
Okay,
So, it
So I'm gonna
could
break
be
in and I'm
interpreted
just gonna-
differently.
Okay.
And the other
All right.
thing is that the state board has the history of the formation of our district in mind.
right, that's.
And
yes.
equity of Act 46.
That's correct,
You know,
right.
Act
right.
46 was one of the
Exactly,
main
yeah.
points of it,
Yeah.
was equity.
Yeah.
So, hope that they would at least discuss it. I don't know that they'll come out in our, you know, in any
Right.
way that's helpful to us.
Right,
I know you had mentioned after I had testified via phone, when we chatted, that they need to have some, like, some children from our district go, so that it puts the flesh and blood to the, black and white of the written statutes. Do you think, I mean, I'm not gonna be on your board, but I will make a trip to Montpelier if there were an opportunity to testify again in the flesh.
I think Raman will let us know if that grandfathering provision is, if they're gonna take testimony on that. Because he did ask me if there would be someone who could testify, and I said that you're our chair, Jane, and that I thought you'd be happy to testify by phone or go
In
up
person,
there.
I'd
You'll
go
go
up
up
there
there?
for that,
Okay.
yep.
So, but yeah, if there are any students that would either like to testify or want to go up there, that would be great. But we just have to, the problem is sometimes the way this happens is we find out like the day before that you've got to go up, so.
And isn't there a current Rupert student that was denied recently, like, possibly? I don't know if. so
There
that-
may be, yeah.
So if
Yeah.
that's the case, it would be someone like, would be passionate about wanting this opportunity and worried about being denied. If someone, like an
Or
older.
a student who's had the opportunity, used it, and is now, you know,
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
a good.
I mean,
Yeah, yeah, both,
you know, like
yeah.
a Zoe
bet
would
we
be
could
able to
find
be
that out.
articulate.
No, go ahead.
so does it make sense that we see what happens at the legislative level first, and then go to state board if that doesn't go the right way?
I think so, yeah. And also, I think as far as the legislative change that would be prompted by Melanie's presentation is something that we would have to be working for next year. Because it's really too late to get that done this year in the legislative session. But I think that if we set out a plan of how we're going to work toward this, we could be working for it over the summer and the fall. And
Can I mention something, just because you were talking about bringing students in? There are reasons why, and I just learned this from speaking to a guidance counselor on the eastern side of the state. They have about half, she says half the students that apply receive them, because you have to qualify academically. So not only would you have to you'd have to be very careful about who you put out there.
Yeah,
So
make sure they qualify.
you'd have to know the reason they were denied.
So what are we looking for an action tonight? Would
Or
it be
for our
to
next
make up a
steps.
plan, to come up with a plan? For next steps, for a work plan on this one specific issue, or what are we looking for?
I think at this point, we need to have it on our next agenda. And by then, we will know what happened in the legislature, if anything.
Because there's nothing we can do at this point to potentially head this off in that way currently, because of how close we are to.
Well, you can board members should feel free to contact Robin Chestnut Tangerman. I mean,
And
I
how
think
about- And how about Senator Sears?
Senator Sears has not said a word.
Never
Not
responded to me.
Didn't reply, yeah.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't not try again.
That's right. I mean, I think for us right now, best case scenario is that this is that we have kiddo, it's grandfathered.
But that gives us a year. That gives us
That would be
time.
best case scenario. So regardless of what happens in the next month, we have work to do on this.
Right.
If we choose to make this a fight, right? And when I
Seems a
say
worthy
fight, I
one.
mean something, I just have to say, as an aside, I don't know as there have been that many students from Rupert or Paulet who have taken advantage of this opportunity, but I speculate that it is because they have not been aware of this opportunity. I sat on the Rupert School Board. I don't know how I missed this, but my Rupert School Board's oversight was 7/12. I didn't become aware of this until this. So how did I miss that? And I don't know. But I suspect that there are a lot of kids that do not know that this opportunity exists. I might be wrong. I might be completely wrong.
Can I
But
offer
just-
a-
Melanie?
Yeah, I sort of looked at the percentages of students that got vouchers, and it was about, 14, 15% of the student population in the schools. And when I looked at that and compared it to Rupert and Paulet, it was 5%. And there was no mechanism to educate kids about it. Not only that, there was no mechanism to track it. It was never, ever mentioned in any of the secretary's reports to the legislature that kids from Salem and Granville received them. And I scoffed at the idea that we had them back then, a few years ago, because I have this document from the state that doesn't mention it. And lo and behold, I do a request and find out, yes, at that point, I think in 2016, there were 6. But it's because people didn't know. And there was no mechanism really to tell them. Now a unified school board could certainly do that.
Right.
And you could even determine courses and eligibility if you wanted to go there for yourself. But, I think just getting the free vouchers back is so important.
Yeah.
Certainly, I'm sorry.
Not knowing your rights does not negate your rights. That,
Mhm.
that's important for us to keep in mind. It may have been in the past that people did not understand that they had this right, but they have it and they should have it.
And it should be equitable what other kids have. I mean, it's,
It should be equitable for every 9th through 12th grade student in this district should have the same opportunity. I believe that's what this board has been founded on,
So would it
and this
be,
district has been
would
founded
it
on, right?
potentially further this cause to bring greater awareness to the community about what we're facing here? Because
A
who
little bit of
beyond?
that with our petitions.
Yeah,
Well,
we
do
did.
petitions,
A little
yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
How many, we got a lot of signatures, right?
Quite a few, over 100. I'm gonna tell you that, I spent personally, every one of these signatures for me, unless I had a husband and wife together, was a 20-minute or a half-hour discussion, because no one knew about
Yeah.
dual enrollment. And so I had to,
Talk to them.
we had dual enrollment? What does that mean? Really? Our kids can do that? I didn't know our kids can do that. How long has this been going?
Quicker
No one
summation.
knew.
I mentioned it at a select board meeting that was televised and well-attended, so it's not that it's not gotten out, it's just.
Yep, I didn't find anybody that knew about it, anybody.
Would a letter perhaps to like the news guide or something like that perhaps help to raise some awareness about it?
How about a press release?
A press release.
Why not? What do we have to lose to put this out there?
Can we
And maybe
authorize
the
a member
press-
of the board to write something or something
Well, when you
tonight?
find out about the miscellaneous ed bill, that's gotta be this week though, right?
It'll be soon, I think, yeah.
Sometime within the next They usually try to wrap up in early May. Next few weeks.
Perhaps, as you said, putting it out in that form would also perhaps be a little bit more friction on the legislative representatives that we have to, perhaps speak to it in some more public forum, because it doesn't sound like it's not even entering into the conversation from the experience you had.
I know you're looking at me and I don't know what to tell you. I'm gonna be in China come Monday morning, so.
Is there, I mean, can we,
Oh, that's neat.
would we need to authorize individual board members? Would we need to act as a board to give authority to an individual board member to draft a letter to a news guide or make a phone call to a reporter at the Rutland Herald or any of that? Or is that stuff that we can simply do?
I wouldn't make a phone call to a reporter. I don't think that that's appropriate for the board to do. I think that if someone wanted to write a letter to the editor or something, that's always within, if there was understanding, you all have a pretty strong understanding of an agreement about, what your position would be on that. That's totally fine. I'm not sure who your audience, what is the purpose of it? Who's your audience? What do you want to accomplish from that communication? I think you should decide. Is it awareness from your public? Are you asking your public to contact their legislators? What do you want out of it? Because just putting it out there is not going to do a whole lot right now unless you're asking for something. So that's the part I think you have to decide.
I was thinking that even with the next year, that community engagement piece, so once we learn more, I think the work should really be coming all of next fall, getting people to be more aware, and maybe hosting a meeting here and getting more people involved.
Maybe the way to do it is, for right now, for board members to contact our legislators again, and then the bigger piece that we've just been talking about could happen when we have more information and we know what happened in the legislature this year, so we know what we want to ask for the coming year, and we have the time to really do it well as far as advocating for it with everyone that we need to advocate with.
I think so, and I think if you should run into some issues this year where there's a student that's denied or something happens, I think you have the ability as a board to say, we're going to support that. We're going to make the decision as a board to financially support that opportunity for this student. And you can do that, and that might be just like that's just a Band-Aid, but it gets you to a place to be, really clear about what is it that you want. What's your ask going to be?
Is that tricky? Because if we supported one student and then the state didn't come through, does that set a precedent where we've supported a student and someone else? I'm just asking.
I think you can be.
I'm a precedent person also, I think
you can be clear in that this is what we've decided to do as we await this,
Await the
because this
decision,
kind of
but-
surprised, because I think what happened is that you surprised kids.
Right. They were
Do you know what I mean?
eligible.
They're anticipating watching possibly a peer or the kid,
Right.
they're good,
So you
on
could
the
do
track
something
team
that
there.
you're just gonna, maybe it's a grandfather that you're doing.
Do we
You know what I
know-
mean?
Do we know if Child X applied and was denied, do they get a letter or some sort of documentation from the state as far what criteria, what box they didn't tick? Do we get that? I mean, would they get that?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
because
don't
then
know,
if
because
we
all
had that
dual
letter,
enrollment funnels purely through the state.
Nine.
We
Right,
never
because-
touch it.
Then we
Because
can
otherwise,
challenge it
how,
with
if
equity.
because we could have kid X got denied because their academic standing, kid Y got denied because they didn't tick the box, the designated box. We're really only volunteering to give that one kid some financial support. So we would need to have some sort of documentation.
Can I add, jump in here a second? I think that you could probably find out what the criteria is from the state as the school board, and then ask the student for the qualifying materials, which I think is a GPA and maybe a letter from your guidance counselor. I'm not 100% sure, but I did hear something about 3.0 or 3.2 maybe as a grade point average. You know, and I'll tell you, that's not 100% certain about that, but I certainly could find out what the criteria is from the states is.
Well, I think all we would need from this, I think we could ask the state to let us know any student, any instance where a student from our district who is attending one of the New York State schools was denied. Because they're not going to look at, did they have the GPA or whatever, they're going to deny them because they're from that school.
They may not
So,
look beyond
yeah,
that.
they won't look
That's right.
beyond that. So that's
Yeah.
really what we need to know.
Right, but then how do we make a commitment to those, I mean?
I think that we'll have some supporting documentation.
So I think before we take an action to make a commitment, we need to work on language that would specify what supporting documentation we would need in order to offer some sort of financial assistance to these kids. But if we want to make a motion to commit to an action, forming an action plan in the next year, over the next year, to get something through the legislator next year, I would fully support making that motion, if that's what we want to do. Or do you want to just wait until after you find out what happens this time?
I personally would support that. I don't see why we would have to wait.
Well, we're going to have to do it either way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
As far as, like, there's a clarifying question, for kids that are applying for this option, is you're talking about they would be applying for the fall? So we have, like, at this point.
There's
in
summer
time-
courses.
Oh, I was wondering if there was summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the State Board of Ed has already essentially worked through whatever submissions they would have gotten on this by now?
The Agency of Ed,
I'm sorry,
I
Agency of Ed.
don't know what the timeframes are. I believe there's applications that are submitted in April, but I don't know what the deadline is.
Looks like there's a lot of, worthwhile directions to go in simultaneously, because what Jackie had mentioned earlier about finding a purpose to the particular, like a press release or something like that. It seems to me like as an initial objective would simply be to raise awareness in the community that this thing exists, and we've had the privilege of using it in the past, and it's
Right.
at risk of going away through a essentially, weird, quirky linguistic glitch, as I'm understanding it now, that we should try to, mobilize our community to.
I think the tricky part is it impacts such a small percentage, specifically, so that to try to get the masses to rally.
Well, look,
is
if you've
gonna
got a
be-
kid who is academically inclined, or excelling, and you would be on the hook potentially for either the kid would be denied, or even if they were accepted, I'm probably talking out of my depth, but, if there was money required and the family couldn't get that money together, that seems like, again, the equity issue goes
Yes.
out the window
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So although it is a small percentage, it does address, it is exactly the thing that we're trying to overcome or
And
equalize.
I think that's the bigger issue, so to speak, that even though it's a small number of people, we tend to believe that for equity, we're all gonna be on the same playing field.
Yeah.
That would be my hope. That will be what
That's what everything's gonna be
drives
about.
the people to say, hey, that's not fair, whether it's my child or not. It's an equity issue. And I think that will get their attention.
Yeah.
So, action steps.
Well,
We're
yeah.
going to wait until we hear from, about Robin's education bill. We're gonna, or whatever that,
Well, I think we were talking about coming up with a plan. I don't know that tonight we have, I think it's going to take some time for us to come up with a plan.
So do we need to take an action
I don't
step
think we need to
like,
take an action
make a
step.
plan, or, okay. So we
Tonight.
don't need to, okay.
Yeah, I think we need to put it on our agenda for next
Yes,
time.
I agree with that then. That's what I just want to move forward, so whatever we need to do.
And if for some reason, I mean, I don't anticipate this happening, but, Jane gets an email like tomorrow that says the state board's gonna talk about this next week.
Yeah.
I'll let y'all know.
Yeah.
I'll let Jackie know, so she can let y'all know.
Jackie's in China. But yes.
And Google's outlawed there.
Right.
I'm
Then, I mean, I think as our chair, Jane has the authority to
Okay.
go and represent us on this. Do we need a motion about that, Jackie, do you think?
No, I
Okay,
don't
I didn't
think
think so
so.
either, yeah.
Okay.
All righty, so no action in regards to that.
Thank you guys. You're done.
Audit letter.
I appreciate your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Melanie.
Melanie.
Thank you. Your next three items are just distribution.
Right?
You'll see, so last time you will see the, letters from the auditors, but that was the last year that those districts existed. So we're just closing out those books. So those are those letters, the audit reports from the three districts that expired. Any questions on that at all? Financial questionnaire, that is something that we're required by, that's packet page 19, you've seen this if you're on the BRSU. We're required by statute to do this.
I've been there,
to
done that.
Do this audit every year, and we share it with you. And it's just really the checks and balances, so you see, here are the processes we go through in our business office to manage finances. And then the last is just your work plan that I always include there in your packet.
Yeah, I'm just gonna highlight a couple of things. I wanted to let you know that Kelly Allfeld last year went to a conference that was from, it was like a whole week. It was an amazing experience, but part of that commitment, that when being on the board, she was gonna write articles. And I wanted to let you know that she has produced her first article. And what was great is that you'll see in the abstract that she's kind of giving credit to our school. So I just think it's really valuable that she's writing articles, and it's a very positive and professional way for us to be acknowledged. So I want to make sure you all knew about that. We already had preschool screening. We will have kindergarten screening. And the parking lot you know about. And the last part, I just want you to be informed, I'm sure some of you have heard, but we do not have pilot bus number 4. That decision was made a few weeks ago, and that was just in regards to, one, finding a bus driver. We had a hard time filling it. At one point in the year, we ended up getting a bus driver. She was on medical leave, and we ended up having Brett and Lisa combine routes and pick up and drop off. And at that point, pretty much Betcha said, we no longer have a bus driver for your bus 4 route, so we actually have redesigned our bus routes, and it seems to be working fine. You will see that pilot bus 4, it's part of us with a leasing agreement that we have, so it's actually parked in the back parking lot. And my concern was we had cameras installed and new radios installed this year. All of you remember the importance of those safety pieces. And so it's our bus right now in the back parking lot. So I just want to make sure all of you are informed. There was a little bit of challenge in between, but I think now we're settled in and things are fine, so. That's it.
Thank you. Okay. Board updates. Board updates. Okay, next meeting date. Our next meeting is May 13th. I think that's a Monday. Reflection on norms.
Just briefly, I just want to thank you for the amount of work that you all are doing. I periodically feel a little guilty and neglectful because I don't feel like I get enough time to spend with this. And I know you all have incredibly busy lives as well, and it's genuinely appreciated. Really.
I would just say, if reflection on our norms, we went a bit over on time on this meeting, but I think we had some important topics, and so I think that we can excuse ourselves
for that.
We got to see a movie.
Yes, and we got
Come on.
to
Right.
How many school boards do you
Next time
meeting
we
do you
gotta
go to
bring
and
the
get to see a
popcorn.
good movie?
I would
Free.
agree with you, ditto on that. Yeah, it's all important stuff, but it certainly has been a lot of time.
And I'd just like to say that I'm really sad that this is Julie's last meeting.
We're not sure of that yet. We're still
Oh.
working on that.
Oh, I was hoping it, okay, all right, I hope that. yeah.
Miscellaneous ed bill.
Fingers crossed,
All right, so
everyone.
I'm not gonna say any more because I don't want to jinx it.
I wanted to talk about, actually, 6C again. I think and part of our thing with being responsive and responsible to our community, I understand the importance of going ahead and getting these bids out and done quickly. I do think it's important for us when we go into our community and have people asking us about what the heck is going on with the parking lot, that I at least have a little bit of an idea of numbers. So I was slightly disappointed that I didn't have even a ballpark number tonight.
I just really feel like I can't. I mean, I don't have that. I mean, the range is huge, and I know that based on that difference, Greg didn't feel comfortable. Like he didn't share those numbers with anyone, not even the contractors that are going out. But if right now anyone was to watch this and I didn't throw out a number, I think that would actually be unfair to any contractor that is putting out bids. So I really can't state any numbers.
But what did we, and I don't remember what we had set aside, what we anticipated, what was in the budget for it, you know, when we looked at in the,
So we're using the reserve fund for that?
right,
And I know that there's like $300,000.
right,
That's the number that we have
Right.
reserved
for that.
for that.
Repair reserve?
It's just the reserve budget for the whole grounds.
Building and grounds reserve
Building
fund.
and grounds,
Yeah.
Reserve fund.
Right, right.
Can you tell us what the high and what the low?
So I know I don't have that, like, it's like all out of my hands at this point. Like, I'm not, like, I used to handle all bids, and that was my role, and now that is not my role. So
Okay.
I don't have, like, it was very secret, top secret information, and I just know that he was not satisfied with the way they broke it up, because the bids were like $100,000 differences, and that we can't even compare apples to apples, because the project, for instance, what they were using for material in the back parking lot varied from 0 to building it up for 12 and 18. So there's like $80,000 differences between two companies, so
But
you
I
can't even compare that.
I mean, we won't approve a bid that isn't within budget,
So it will be less than $300,000.
yeah.
But
And
now that we're
we
doing
can
less
find out-
concrete work, I definitely think that, you know, it'll save us a lot of money by doing paving instead of, you know, and the reason why we did that is based on, like, maintenance of that. We never really thought about, right now, the drainage issue is a huge issue. If we were to have concrete sidewalks, we have nowhere to push that snow. So we changed.
That's also, you know, I know from my experience in my business that the bidding process is only going to be as accurate as the bidding proposal is. The more specific the proposal is, the better the numbers are that you will get.
So we revised it, and
The
it's a
fact that
much
you've
better,
revised it
yeah.
is a really good thing, because otherwise it leaves it like $100,000 spreads for the same job.
We're also hoping more people will bid, because there were many contractors here. Some paving companies didn't want to do the work, and some of our local excavation companies wanted to bid, but you have to partner with a paving company. So that limited some, but only getting 3 bids is not very, and we have to have a minimum of 3, but I think there'll be more people bidding out. We'll see tomorrow who shows up at 9 o'clock to look at the job, but I'm hopeful that they'll have more people bid.
I mean, the alternative to it is, you know, I mean, and I don't know how you do this with Robert's rules, but if you're not comfortable with that, we just don't move forward until you've seen the bid in May. And what we're concerned about with that is that then we don't know if we can get the work done.
And we are very clear the work has to be done by August 16th, because it needs to be set and ready for us to start school the following week, so.
Yeah, it's a problem, that's for sure, I mean, the parking lot.
And we waited, like, this is like going on our 3rd year waiting for this project. The last year that when we had an engineer come in, like, what they provided us was not what we needed or wanted, so we didn't go that route. But I do feel like we have more and more clarity about what we want, and I'm hopeful. And a lot of contractors, this will be their big project. They would be cutting out a huge chunk of their time starting right away in June. When the parking lot's empty, they'll begin the work.
So by the time the work starts, I mean, even by our next meeting, you would be able to give us a number of what
Yes.
it was. So we're gonna know before the work even begins what the number is. Yeah.
So will that be on next meeting's agenda? Or should it? Yeah.
Last time I went through the process, when I did it with the boilers, I had to propose to you a summary of at least 3 companies and the varied information, so I'm sure Greg will prepare that for the board meeting.
Well, the bid, we're asking for them
The
not.
bid will be approved
Bid will
before
be
our
approved.
meeting.
So
Right.
it's not the board approving the bid.
But usually the details are presented, right? to
Yeah,
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 so you'll
'cause
have
all
like,
bids are public,
yeah.
yep.
Okay, reflection on norms, public comment. Okay,
Sadly, always goes quickly around here,
it
doesn't it?
sure does. Okay, so at this time, I need a motion for us to move into executive session.
I will make a motion for us to go into executive session under 1 VSA, Section 313A, subsection. Just make sure I get this right. 3, the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee.
Okay, we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
We go into executive session at 9:07.